Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this Friday's webinar from Annika Digital. It's myself and Stanley. I'm the founder and CEO of Annika, and I'm very pleased to have with me our speaker for this week, which is Sean Ball. Hi, Sean. I think you might be on mute.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Sean's going to be talking about aligning sales and marketing. And we've also got Tony Ogby, who's in very rainy Manchester. He's my co-host every week, and I think you're going to be running the I think in a couple of weeks you're going to be running the webinars on your own, so good luck with that. As I'm going off to Cornwall at half term, so that will be amazing. We've already had a conversation with a few of you about the terrible weather in the UK at the moment, so what we'll do is we'll dive straight in, and while we're waiting for a few more people to arrive, Tony's going to do the polls. So over to you, Tony.
Perfect. So you should see the polls pop up. There are 3 polls, and the first one should be live now.
And I think what you're looking for here is a sort of general, whether you think yourself more as a salesperson or a marketing person. And even if you're not in a job at the moment, how do you perceive yourself, I guess is what you're asking for there. Yeah. Could you hit max on the poll so we can see the results, please? That's it. Brilliant. That's interesting, isn't it? So 77% in marketing and 23% in sales. So have you got any comments on that then, Sean?
It's always interesting because I sort of sit on the fence, I guess, in terms of marketing and sales. Where does one end and the other begin? Often when it comes to lead generation and driving commercial outcomes. The reason I like to ask this poll is I can deliver my talk in a few different ways. So I want to make sure that I'm saying the right things to the right people. Because somebody once said to me, are you in the marketing camp or the sales camp? And I was like, I think the way you've worded that question reveals a lot about about your organization.
Exactly. That sounds like they're, two enemies marking up against each other, whereas they should be hand in hand and partners in crime, really, shouldn't they? So interesting. Okay, next poll, please.
Max with this.
Oh, this is a bit polar. You can't even have anything in the middle.
Either really good or really bad. I think this question, guys, is to just get a bit of a benchmark, really, in terms of how is your sales effectiveness, both in terms of sales colleagues, but also marketing's impact on sales.
I wish you'd given me 3 choices.
What would the third one have been, Anne?
Well, I would have said something like 1 to 4, 5 to 6, and then 7 to, and then everybody would have gone in the middle. So,
by the way, sorry, 5 to 10 is good. We mean, so like 10 being really good, 1 being not very good.
Okay.
Some interesting responses. But yeah, that's it.
So it's a pretty even split on that one, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's it. So Sean, you can take over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the help, Tony.
Yeah.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Ball, not the famous rapper, unfortunately. I have been working in sales and marketing for about 15 years or so, most of which have been in senior leadership roles. I come from a family of salespeople. I'm the first to go to the dark side of marketing, or I should say the light side, actually, given how many people would classify themselves as marketing on this webinar. I was marketing director for what became the UK market leader in outsourced sales. So I started as the only marketer in a company full of salespeople. I had no friends. Everyone thought I was a waste of time and were quite cynical, really. I had all the classic jokes and jibes that I imagine most people on this call have heard before. The colouring in department, the department of fluffiness. He just writes some blogs and who knows what he really does. And part of that experience was deeply frustrating in many ways, but also incredibly beneficial because our sales colleagues were not entertain anything that didn't show tangible impact on commercial outcomes. Excuse me. So that frames what I'm going to talk about here on my slides, because I think part of the challenge of commercial effectiveness of an organization is a tension between sales and marketing. And you may have experienced this yourself. And if not, I'd be very surprised if you did not experience this at some point in your career, both if you work in B2B or B2C, frankly. So that's what I'm going to be covering in this session. How do we align the two functions to make it as harmonious and seamless as possible, both from a strategic and sort of structural point of view, and then maybe on a kind of personal point of view, because, you know, the two people or the personalities involved in both camps need to get on, and there are see some things in which we could do to try and improve that process. I should say, if you have any questions throughout, please do pop them into the chat. I'll try and answer them all at the end. My trusty colleague Tony, I'm sure, will help me along the way. And with that, let's just jump straight in. So we know who's who. We've done this. Thank you for answering that poll. I would submit that marketing's job is to make sales easier and or faster. Would anybody disagree with that statement? Put it in the chat if you would disagree. The reason I think this is because ultimately, certainly in the private sector and in a business context, ultimately we need to be driving revenue in the organization, revenue and profit, and that's marketing's job. And I think sometimes marketing and sales, they can think one's more important than the other one. I once had a client of mine who said that the sales director said marketing is a guest in the house of sales. It was an interesting way to think about it, because clearly one drives the other. And I think this is part of the challenge. You know, it's like trying to, you know, win a boxing match with one arm tied behind your back if you just sort of think of them in isolation. Similarly, marketers, and maybe some people might not like what I'm going to say next, but I think marketers sometimes can sort of hide behind fluffy metrics, can bamboozle people with terminology that they don't fully understand. For example, you know, impressions, share of voice, click-through rate, engagements, and it can kind of hide behind stuff. Frankly, our counterparts in sales, there's no hiding. If they miss their KPI, it's quite binary. It's black and white, and potentially will lose their job if they don't hit targets. And that's the big source of tension when it comes to the metrics misalignment. And I think that's what can annoy salespeople about marketers. Because if we're not showing how we're driving commercial objectives and commercial outcomes, and we're sort of talking about follower growth and backlinks and domain authority and engagements, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for sales outcomes? Where sales are judged on how many calls have you made, how many meetings have you booked, how many closed won deals do you have, what's the order value, what's your pipeline, and that can be a major source of conflict, certainly in my experience. So what I would advise, and I guess the kind of ambition, perhaps not of this session, but I hope so, is for you to become fluent in sales. And what I mean by that is start speaking the language of your sales colleagues, start showing how you can prove impact on what you're doing. One of the things that worked really well for me when I was at this outsourced sales agency is when we got inbound sales calls, I would just take them. I would answer them and I would qualify them. And then I would pass my sales colleagues sort of oven ready deals pretty much. And they were like, after a while, they were like, wow, this guy's actually, you know, not full of BS. He's actually pretty good. Not only is he generating leads for us, but he's qualified them. But more so than that, guys, it actually helped me get insight into the target audience that we were trying to reach. And the words they were using to describe their problems, to describe their aspirations, because part of the challenge is marketers probably talk to our target customer more than anyone else. But we have the least direct interaction. We're relying on secondary data sources. We're relying on other people to tell us. We're relying on, numbers on a screen, and we rarely get the opportunity to directly speak to our target customer. So that's a bit of a mismatch, I think. And again, that's why the misalignment of sales and marketing can become exaggerated over time. And our sales colleagues, they're worried about closing deals. It's unfair to expect them to have this level of awareness of, listening for the words that are being used, right? And sort of thinking, how do we improve our marketing messaging based on the feedback we're getting from the customer? They've got enough on their plate, right? They need to try and qualify and sell and diagnose and close and propose. So I'm a big fan of getting marketing people to get involved in the sales process, both from inbounds. Of course, most organizations, the phone's not ringing off the hook, right? Hopefully yours will be at some point, or perhaps will be now. And the other thing is just shadow sales calls. Get your marketing colleagues, or perhaps marketers on this call, on this webinar, ask your sales colleagues if you can shadow some of their opportunities and some of their calls they're having with prospects, even if you don't say anything. Just listen out for what's being said. That some salespeople don't like that, right? Can be a bit heavy-handed. So the next best thing is to ask to get a recording of the sales calls, which most people tend to do, so that you can analyze it. And again, you can listen back then and sort of pick out key bits. I'll give you one example of why I think this is so important, and maybe you might resonate with this. We had an organization that wanted to use words that frankly they thought made themselves sound more intelligent, right? More advanced, more sophisticated. And this is a common challenge. Right? I feel like, when you at school and at uni, you almost would make yourself try and sound more intelligent than you were. That was like the driving force. And then you get into the real world and you think, actually, just write like you talk. Like, why are you trying to make stuff sound more complicated than it is? And Stanley, who you've all obviously met, and Stanley was a mentor of mine, by the way. That's how we first met, Anne, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When I was at Durham Lane. And one of the things that Anne taught me that's really stuck with me and was really important, I think, in the springboard of my career was she was so frustrated when she was like, why use words that your customers don't understand, that your customers aren't searching for? Like, why using words like revenue acceleration and sales transformation? And our target customer did not know what that meant. They used words like telemarketing, tele-sales, outsource sales. And our founders were like, oh, we don't like those words. They devalue what we sell. And that was, again, a misalignment there, because it was like, well, hang on. The people who pay us the most, what words did they use? Not what we want. Forget us. It's not about us and what we think. It's who pays us the most, who are our best customers, and what do they say? So I think that's really kind of key to look at the misalignment, not just of metrics, but also of language. And that's why, just to circle back to this point, that's why I think it's so important that marketers should have a vested interest in the sales process, not just to gain respect of sales colleagues, which is obviously very important, but for your own benefit, so that you can improve the campaigns that you're doing.
I think that's quite interesting, because somebody's asked the question, I think it was Lars asked the question about what MQLs are. And most marketing businesses, unless they're in a sales environment, don't actually use that terminology. So I wondered if you could just explain what an MQL is and an SQL. I put the definition in, but I haven't explained it.
Okay, thank you, guys. Sorry for skipping off that point. It means marketing qualified lead. Now, different organizations have different criteria for this. There's no kind of unifying standard. And a lot of people are sneaky with their marketing qualified lead definitions. It should be, and I'll just go back, sorry, because I come on the slide a minute. It should be any good fit, this term of ICP, ideal customer profile. It should be any person that meets an ideal customer profile that has inquired or has raised their hand in some way, has shown what I would call declared intent. They've called, filled out a form, inquired in some way, shape, or form. Not assumed intent, right? That they've hit the website or whatever, great, but have they raised their hand? Have they declared their intent? And they have to be a good fit. They have to match the ICP. Once they have been engaged by sales and there is a tangible commercial outcome there, or you start talking, right, okay, we're going to progress this opportunity now to potentially a scope or a proposal, that's when it becomes a sales qualified lead, because sales have now qualified that lead. So some marketers are sneaky. I've seen this firsthand, especially in enterprise, where they have an MQL target that might be arbitrary. Again, going back to the misalignment, it's not grounded in conversion rates and integration with sales. It's like, we need to generate 10,000 MQLs this quarter. Anybody who downloads an ebook is therefore an MQL. Clearly, that's going to cause friction. And this is part of the challenge as well, because marketing historically, I think less so these days, but certainly maybe 10 years ago, someone would download an ebook and it would just get chucked over to sales. And then sales would waste time calling somebody who's downloaded an ebook, not necessarily a good fit for them, no intel on other data sets, which we'll come on to in a moment. And sales would call them, they wouldn't be ready to buy, or they wouldn't answer the call, or they'd go, no, I was just browsing or whatever. And then that would, they go, I'm not going to bother calling any of these leads, these marketing qualified leads, because they're not a good use of my time. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing, forget marketing. I'm just going to focus on what I need to do so I don't lose my job.
I'm gonna make this a little bit interactive, because I think there's some really interesting things you've got to say there. There's an acronym or something that people use to qualify customers as well. Are you going to come on to that, or can you give a little bit of a hint on some of the things that you would use to qualify a customer, which would then mean that you then pass them over to sales?
Sorry, can you...
So things like the budget and whether they're a decision maker and stuff like
that. Okay, I'm going to ask a question and just pop it in the chat, guys, if you have, just yes or no. Has anyone heard of BANT qualified leads?
That was the one.
And it's not banter. I know on a Friday morning, but I'm being serious. It's
BANT, isn't it?
BANT.
Okay, let's see.
No.
And Craig said he's been in sales for 20 years. He probably does know what it is, but he's probably not heard that acronym before.
Well, by the way, massive congratulations to Craig. Industry stalwart over there, 20 years. Wow, I bet the industry's changed along quite a bit in that time. Only in directory. That's funny. Okay, so BANT, guys. BANT means budget, authority, need, time scale. And the idea of a BANT qualified lead is you would satisfy all of that criteria when you try to qualify an opportunity. So do they have budget? Do they have authority? Does that person have the authority to sign off the deal? Is there a need there for it? Like, we used to say things like, is the perceived pain of moving to a new system or a new solution less than the perceived pain of staying where they are, right? So that's kind of what we need. And then timescale is, what kind of timescale do they need to work on? Now, in an ideal world, you would obviously BANT qualify every opportunity, but I dare say people on this call, especially the marketers, you have access to budget some way, shape or form, maybe not as much as you perhaps once had. If someone was to ask you on a sales call, so how much budget is there for this? Even if you had budget assigned, you're not going to tell that person, are you? So I think there needs to be a level of nuance there. Also, the key thing is most decision makers can make a budget available, right? If they're really compelled by whatever form of sales and marketing to identify a problem or an aspiration that they perhaps weren't aware of, or they didn't have budget allocated previously, you can make budget available for certain things. That's why the idea of BANT came about 20 years ago, I think, maybe about 15 years ago, particularly in tech sales and solution-led sales. And the idea was that salespeople would only accept an opportunity that was band qualified from marketing. Now, the obvious challenge there is, well, how is marketing going to band qualify a lead? So again, that became a bit of a source of tension between the two functions, certainly in larger tech organizations. I'm not sure if anyone experienced that firsthand. So yeah, what have we got here? Band means authority need. Yep, Tracy's very, very similar. There are lots of acronyms that have been relabeled in the industry over the last few years to basically say the same thing. My key message here to you would be there needs to be a level of nuance applied, because shock horror, everybody has a life. It's just as complicated as yours and complex as yours. And you don't know what's going on in that person's life or in that team or in that organization. People don't always neatly fit into our classifications of leads or through our sales process or move through in a linear fashion. Things can get delayed. People can lose their jobs. Stuff can happen in personal life. I think as well, though, in this country, in the UK, we aren't the best at engaging with salespeople. I think sometimes we think that saying nothing and just ignoring them is somehow less rude than saying, listen, it's a no for now, but maybe we'll come back to you in the future. We think that's somehow more rude than just ignoring that person and letting them continue to follow up with you time and time again. But we've seen this many times with some of the clients that I've worked with, where you can try and instill a sense of FOMO, right, fear of missing out, or instill a sense of urgency with your opportunities, but you don't know what's going on in that person's life, right? Sometimes they'll come back a year later, 2 years later. So the point I'm making here is band in theory makes sense, but in the real world, you have to apply a level of nuance. And I think that's where the skill comes in for a good salesperson, because a good salesperson should know how to ask questions. I'm sure Craig knows this. You should be trying to seek to understand, not to sell necessarily, to try and push someone into doing something that you want to do. It's how do you diagnose what their problem is? I think that should be the application of band. When we come back to this idea of like a need, well, what is the need there? What have they tried to do previously to fix the problem? Have they tried to do anything? What would happen if they did nothing? You have to be careful with this one, but how much is this costing them, or what do we think the implications are of this problem or this aspiration that they're trying to overcome? And also, when we ask this idea of are they the decision maker, I mean, how rude would that be? Like if someone was trying to sell Anne something, are you the decision maker? Even if Anne is, she'd be like, that's a bit of an awkward question to ask, isn't it? And also, it's probably very rare that we make decisions in isolation, especially these days. There's on average 5 to 10 people. Would you say that's right? About 5 to 10 people involved in any purchase decision, even for small software and small solutions. So they might be the person that signs the check, but they might not be the only person involved. So what I'm saying here is the question to ask might be, who else is interested in this? Or who else do you think needs to be involved in this process? And what do you think they value the most? Part of the challenge with sales is you don't always get the opportunity to speak to the other decision makers in the process. And you don't know what they necessarily care about or what's driving their ambitions or their, keeping them awake at night. So anyway, sorry, I've riffed a bit there on band, Anne. Sorry, was that useful? Is that what you wanted me to do?
Yeah, that's fine. I've probably taken up too much time now on that question.
I'll talk about this and I'll try and be useful. Okay, so what I just wanted to quickly talk about here is when we come back to metrics. This is less about qualification of opportunities, but more about holistically across marketing and sales. How do we get to metrics that matter? Because impressions, clicks, click-through rates, all that stuff, we know as marketers, see how I can sort of go back and forth because I'm both. We know that's really important, right? But how does that translate into pipeline and things that drive the organization forward? So there's this idea of a metric called pipeline velocity, which is what I'm showing you now on this slide. Now, the traditional assumption is that this one on the left here, SQL, which you remember means sales qualified lead, the number of SQLs is the holy grail, right? That's what we should all care about. How many leads do we have coming through the organization? But clearly that's only one part of it, because that begs the question, well, how many are we converting? How fast are we converting them? And, how much money are we making from them on average? So there's 4 levers that can be pulled across pipeline velocity that will influence the revenue and ultimately profitability of any organization. So this metric here, this equation, which I'm going to run through in more detail now, this is trying to capture and to be a holistic measure across all 4 levers. And also it puts a bit of partnership involved with the sales, with sales and marketing, because it's less about, well, what's marketing doing and what's sales doing. It's as a team, as an integrated sales marketing function, this is our collective metric. So how it works is you go, how many SQLs do we have in our pipeline? Let's, for argument's sake, say it's 20. What's the average deal size currently? Let's say it's £10,000. And what's our overall win rate? Now, this does vary between organizations. A good benchmark, I think, is just 1 in 4, right? 25%. It can be less than that. It can be more than that at any given time. But that's a good benchmark. And then what's the length of our sales cycle from inquiry to close? Again, some people might measure it in a slightly different way, but generally it's from initial inquiry to sign the order or whatever the sales process is to then classify closed won. Length of sales cycle in days. So you times your SQLs by your average deal size, by your win rate. So as a percentage, if it's if it's 25%, you would do 0.25%. So you do, 0.25 is what I'm trying to say there, to represent the percentage. And then you divide it by the length of days it takes to close that opportunity on average in any given time frame. This will give you a number, and that number is meant to be representative of new revenue flowing into the organization. If it's going up, then you're doing something right across these 4 variables, these 4 levers. If it's going down, something's wrong. So how this would work in the wild, if you will, in practicality, is if your SQLs are going up, but your win rate is going down, then your pipeline velocity is probably going to go down, right? Because we're getting new leads in. So well done, marketing, but we're not closing them. So what's the problem here? It's maybe there's a problem with the people that we're going after. Maybe we're not saying the right things. Maybe we're not attracting the right target audience to us. If deal size is also going down, again, it would suggest that maybe we're not reaching the right people. Now, sometimes organizations get to a point where the number of SQLs or even marketing qualified leads go down, but pipeline velocity is going up. What would that suggest? That would suggest that actually marketing and sales is working better now, because the focus is less on just new stuff coming in. It's we're winning bigger, we're winning better, and we're winning more often. So that's where you start. I won't digress on this too much, but that's the idea of like an account-based marketing approach, where it's less about numbers of leads coming in. It's more about, well, what are our collective sales and marketing efforts delivering for the organization? So when you transition to this type of metric, again, it's not something you just switch on. Lots of companies, I've had this before, guys, where I will consult with companies. I talk roughly about what I've just said there, and people go, right, this is amazing. Pipeline velocity, that's where we're going to move to. We're going to stop measuring MQLs and we're going to move to an account-based marketing approach. And then the next month, the question at the board meeting is, why are MQLs down? Like, well, because we've agreed we're going to focus less on MQLs and more on pipeline velocity across sales and marketing effectiveness across the board. So sometimes a cultural shift as well. That doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just go from, a prop plane to an F-16 jet, right? You have to build up to it. And this might be the ambition of your organization to get here. The other thing as well, which I think marketers, no one on this call, of course, but I think marketers sometimes shy away from being measured in this way because the results might not always be that great. The numbers might not always show exactly what we want them to show. Part of the challenge for that, of course, and this is more Anne's bag, but part of the challenge for that, of course, is measuring like brand and PR as the most effective form of marketing, really, for the organization. I think no one would disagree with that. Maybe you would, but it's the hardest to measure. It's the hardest to measure. It's the hardest to put into this equation. Like, where does brand and PR and sort of goodwill and, our brand reputation, where is that here? Well, it's not, is it? It's like, in your human body, where is your mind? Where is your soul? Well, we don't know, but clearly it's there. If it's not there, you would know about it. So that's, I think, where the friction can come in as well, because you might deliver a fantastic brand campaign, but really struggle to measure that in terms of sales effectiveness. Hopefully, organizations would have that level of nuance to understand that, but we probably all know that that's not always the case. And probably a few shivers went down a few spines there. There's always something, that I say, it's Friday, so I'll say it, but sometimes there's a classic joke in marketing that, all men fear being measured. Moving swiftly onwards from that, probably a bit too early. Tips on bridging the gap between sales and marketing. I've already mentioned a few here, but just to reiterate this point, get marketers to sell. I think if you can sort of demonstrate, I'm not suggesting you spend all day making sales calls and, shadowing salespeople, but I would encourage marketers to take and qualify inbound sales calls, or even make follow-up calls on people who have inquired. So let me paint this picture, and this might sound familiar for some people on this call. I have been sort of parachuted into companies before where there's a big misalignment between sales and marketing. Marketing is generating leads, but sales aren't following up on them, or they're not happy with the level of effort. Like, we'll get an inquiry, sales will send a generic email. Oh, thanks for inquiring. Let me know if you want to have a call. And then, shock horror, the lead doesn't take a next step. You don't hear back from them. We'll say, have you called them? No. Okay. We find out what the number is. We call them. And then the lead will answer the call and say, oh, sorry, I've been really busy. I get hundreds of emails, as we all do. I have seen it. I just haven't had a chance to action it yet. Well, while I've got you on the call, should we book in a meeting now? Yeah, okay. Right. When would suit you? We book the call. Salesperson attends the call, has a good call, and then closes that opportunity. If that person hadn't have been called, that might not have happened, right? That, going back to pipeline velocity, that sales cycle would have been unnecessarily increased because nobody called them. I think people have an aversion to calling people these days. I'm not quite sure why. I think we all need to, frankly, speak more on the phone and speak less over email and digital forms of communication. And then the other thing, which I haven't spoken about in this much detail, is get salespeople to be involved in the marketing process. Not to the point where they, don't spend any time calling and spend all day writing blogs. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But we know that our salespeople are connected with lots of prospects and lots of customers, especially on LinkedIn, and suppliers, and their network, let's be honest, guys, is probably better than us as marketers. And yet we don't utilize it. We don't utilize it. If we can leverage their LinkedIn profiles and their own kind of content expertise, because ultimately they're going to be the ones speaking to customers. So we need to, how do we create their own, I don't want to use the word personal brand as such, because that sometimes has a negative connotation. But how do we use their outposts, if you will, to further our marketing messages and content? The third point here is implementing what I would call an SLA, mutual SLA. This is more of a technology term for IT service providers. It means service level agreement. I think this is quite a useful thing to implement. It's try and be more carrot than stick with this, guys, by the way. But it's you say things like, right, sales and marketing, that's what a treaty, if you will, right? Where we agree that we will provide you assets, case studies, content, whatever the salespeople need, right? At a certain level every quarter or every month. But sales, you agree that you will follow up with our inbound leads within 24 hours of whatever you think is necessary. I would say no longer than a day or two max, by the way. I'm not sure if anyone on this call has ever experienced this firsthand, but I certainly have, where salespeople don't follow up with leads for days. And then, like, this lead's probably forgot, or a competitor has responded quicker than we have, and you've lost the opportunity. This does happen. Some people probably sat there thinking, really? It does happen. I've seen it many times before. So you have a mutual service level agreement is a good thing to do. And try and integrate, sorry, tripping over words here. Try and intertwine metrics. So marketers start talking about leads, opportunities, ROI, closed won revenue, maybe focus less on impressions and click-through rates and that kind of thing. And pipeline velocity is a good metric to aspire to. You might not necessarily move to that straight away. But what I've found is if you go to a board level meeting or to your sales colleagues and say, this is our ambition, we're going to be measured in this way, or we're going to, start to think about how we can be measured in this way. It gains respect really quickly. And then just candidness and learning from each other and just being brutally honest. I think sometimes this is more of a personality thing than a structural thing. I used to say, this is a bad example really, because I don't really drink anymore. I'm one of those boring people. But I used to say, go out and get drunk together. Go out and have a few drinks together, just get to know each other personally. These days, you might want to go for a run or something, or go to the gym together. This is kind of obvious, really, but just spend time on a personal level. I think when the sales and marketing people or leaders trust each other and like each other as people, it makes all this stuff a lot easier. When that's not the case, it's much, much harder. So that's my tips on bridging the gap. I won't speak too much about this, but I just want to share with you some quick wins. Would we like some quick wins? Of course we do. So some people might have this set up already. This is something called Albacross. What Albacross is it's known as a reverse static IP address lookup tool. Quite a mouthful. Try saying that after you've had a few drinks. It's basically, there are some tools out there. It basically tells you which organizations are hitting the website. If they have a static IP address, not every organization does. And if people work from home, they have a dynamic IP address and it won't always capture everything. But when I ask companies, do you know which companies are hitting your website? Do you have anything set up? And they say no. Well, again, it comes back to marketing and sales alignment. If we know certain target companies are hitting our website and sales aren't using that information, or they don't have access to that information, that's a bit of an obvious missing piece of the puzzle. So if you go to albacross.com/free, you can get a free version of this that will go on your website. There are tools called like Lead Forensics as well, which do the same thing. The interface is probably much nicer, but costs a bleeding fortune. This will give you a level of insight. It will tell you the first 200 people hitting your first 200 companies hitting your website every month for free. You can upgrade if you want to, but that's some insight for you. The next one is something called Bombora, or Bombardier, as Anne prefers to call it. What this will tell you is it's a very expensive tool, by the way. It's like 24 grand a year minimum normally. Don't worry if you've fallen off the chair. There's a free version of it that you can access, which is called Company Surge Alerts. I believe that's still around. What it does is it uses third-party cookies across tens of thousands of websites across the internet. As a consumer, the things that you always hate when companies websites make you forced to accept cookies. Well, as marketers, we can use this insight. So it will tell you which organizations are showing intent by the increase or decrease of content that is being consumed from that organization relative to different topics. So when I was working for a compensation management software company, we used it to determine who we, because people only in the market every few years for this type of thing. If we saw organizations were increasing for these topics, that would suggest they were more likely to want to speak to us or more likely to respond to our sales and marketing campaigns, where we could target them with marketing messages and our salespeople could also follow up with those people. Just be careful though, because sometimes we find if they're showing intent for certain topics, may have missed the boat because they might have already made the decision. So you have to be more nuanced in your thought process. When I worked for an outsourced sales company, outsourced sales was a topic that we could use. So we thought, great, this is going to make our life so much easier. Everyone who we spoke to were like, oh, we've just signed with this company. Or sorry, if you came to us 30 days ago, you probably would have been in the running. We had to be more nuanced in our thinking. So we started to track terms like office expansion or overseas law, stuff that would suggest they're earlier in the process of thinking about how they expand sales or how they, go into a new territory. The last one I'm going to share with you is something called smart links. This is probably the best thing that you'll hear about my talk, frankly, guys, because nobody knows about smart links, and I'm not sure why. Smart links is a form of it's a product of Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Sales Navigator Advanced, not Sales Navigator Core. It's hard to buy for some reason. They make it quite hard to buy. If you just type in LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it will try and force you to buy the core product, which does not have this. I don't know why. Well, I think I know why. When I tell you how it works, you'll go, because if more people knew about this, they probably would object to it. It's essentially a de facto landing page. So it looks like this one I'm sharing with you here. This is one I use when somebody says to me, when they inquire and I have a chat and they go, look, will you send me some case studies or testimonials or more information about what you do?
Can I ask you about that? Because the one that we've set up looks really rubbish at the moment. So do we need to change it? Do we need to edit it to make it look better? Because when Tony clicked on it for the first time and I clicked on it for the first time, I thought, oh, this is a bit rubbish. So how can you customize this page?
No, that's the trade-off. You can't customize anything other than the content that you can upload to it. So I'll just, and if it's okay, I'll finish explaining how it works, and then we can come back to how you can, I guess, the kind of pros and cons. So it's basically any PDF or MP4 content. So I think my brochures, case studies, testimonials, webinar snippets, whatever, podcast snippets, you can upload it onto a smart link. You can share that. So it's basically a link. You share that link with anyone, target customers, doesn't really matter. You can think of a few different ways on how to use it. The key thing is what it gives you is this type of insight. It tells you who is clicking on and viewing your content in real time, how long they're watching videos for, how long they're spending on each page without them necessarily knowing, by the way. There's no gated form. We don't ask for their first name, last name, company name, email, none of that. As long as they have a LinkedIn profile, which 90+% of people do, and it's signed in on the browser, which again, most people leave LinkedIn signed in on the browser. They can just access the content, no gated form, click through, view whatever you have put on that link, but you will know what they've clicked on and how long they've spent. So why is this important for sales and marketing integration? Well, two key ways, I think. The first one is the obvious way for us marketers, right? Again, goes back to insight. We can see, are people engaging with the content? How long are they spending on each page? Sometimes people put all the good stuff towards the end of a document, and then we can see here that people aren't even getting there, that we're losing them. And if you send stuff as an attachment, you would have no idea. You just would have no idea if that was the case or not. So it's insight for us to improve what we do is the first point. The second point is, it goes back to Anne's question before about, marketing qualified lead. If you can go to a sales colleague and say, these are our target prospects. Okay, they've not declared their intent yet. They've not spoken to us, but look, They've been viewing our case studies. They've been clicking on this link. They've been back multiple times. They've forwarded to people in their organization. You should probably reach out to these people. And your salespeople don't reach out and go, oh, hi, you've spent 4 minutes on page 3. Are you ready to buy from us now? That's obviously not the approach you would take, right? Because people find that creepy. You would say things like in the follow-up, oh, my marketing colleague said you may have been looking at some of our content. I'm just wondering if you had any questions. And was your curiosity satisfied? Even if they say things like, oh, I was just browsing or whatever, you say, okay, no, that's fine. What were you hoping to learn, though? What kind of piques your curiosity? You're engaging then in a sales conversation, right? Because then we can go back to them later and say, we spoke a few weeks ago. Just wondering how you getting on in your process. Have you spoke to your colleague yet? Is it okay if I send you some more resources? You're getting in earlier in the process then. You're kind of trying to control the sales process more. Salespeople love this because this is insight that you just do not normally have. Part of the challenge with content, I think, in my opinion, is marketers spend loads of time creating great content and then don't leverage it nearly as much as they could. And even if they do, they post it on LinkedIn, they do whatever we do, don't really know who's viewing it. We can say, oh, numbers of impressions, numbers of clicks. Yeah, but who? Who is it? Well, because of GDPR, normally we don't have that level of insight, but because of the way LinkedIn works and users accept the cookie policy to use it for free, we can get this level of insight. So this one thing alone can transform how sales and marketing work together. I'm going to pause now. I think Anne's going to ask me a question.
Yeah, I was going to say yes, but Sean, I can use a bit.ly link or I can use a tracked link from somewhere else, and that's amazing. And I can see exactly who's opened it. And you would reply, but...
Yeah, I would reply, but so the challenge with those things, I mean, you could create in theory, and I have done this before, I'm sure people have on this call, you can create lots of different links with custom UTMs and only use those custom UTMs to go to
you need to explain what UTM is now.
Okay, I don't know what it stands for.
It's a universal tracking something or another, but you can just explain what it does rather than...
You know what we should do? We should do like a marketing pub quiz one time, and we should ask that question. So basically, you create multiple links, and then you put a little unique bit of that link, and then that unique link will go to the person that you're sending it to, and then you know that if that person has clicked that link, that it had to be that person. But there's some challenges with that. The first one is, what if they forward it to other people in the organization? What if they forward it to a competitor? You would have no idea. You would not know that. If you use a smart link, because people are signed into their browser, I guess there are some use cases where you might have a false positive. For example, if a CEO has a ghostwriter, like a junior marketing person who is a ghostwriter and signed into their browser as their LinkedIn, and then they click that link, that might come through as the CEO when it's not. That might happen, but it's unlikely. People don't normally do that, right? You will know which person it is most of the time. Whereas if you use a HubSpot link or some of the other links, unless that person has filled out a form previously and is cookied on their device, they will not share that information with you. They will ask for their for their email address again, and most people might not want to do that because it's a bit intrusive. Or they'll spoof it. They'll say things like no@no.com or some other colorful language.
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just to bring you all up to date. Troy explained what it was. So Troy has said it is called Urchin. It's tracking module. Now, Urchin, for those that have been around for as long as me, was the company that Google bought when they first created Google Analytics. So that's what UTM stands for. And we have got a page on our website called URL UTM Builder, where you can create your own UTM codes, which are bits of tracking code that goes onto the end of the URL. And when you get into analytics, you can track them. However, things like email systems like MailChimp, when they send out when they send out emails, they'll track the individual links, and you'll know because it's sent from your system who's individually tracked it. But but these tracking links stop deliverability, don't they? So that's the concern. Somebody said about, is there a cheap version of Smart Links? No, it's not. It's over 100 quid.
You can't, I think so. If you've not used a premium product before on LinkedIn, you can get a free trial, I believe. They may have removed that now.
Yeah,
but it's about £150 a month. You can get it cheaper if you sign up for, I think, for the year. In my opinion, it's worth it just for this Smart Link, to be able to use Smart Link. There's no cap on Smart Links, by the way, that you can have hundreds. Sorry, one just quick thing on this as well. What salespeople love as well, when you say this to them, you can put proposals on it. Think about how it's just PDF content. You could put a proposal on a Smart Link, get the salesperson to then use the Smart Link to forward to the prospect. When the sales prospect clicks the link of the proposal, the salesperson will know. So they go, right, he's seeing I might give him a call the next hour. I might give him a call right now. If you don't use it, you'd have no idea if they've even opened the thing, if they've even got it. So how do you determine when's the best time to follow up? Again, going back to pipeline velocity, it's not just about more leads and winning stuff bigger. It's about how do we accelerate the process? How can we reduce the sales cycle time? If you put that to your salesperson, I guarantee, well, there's nothing guaranteed in life but death and taxes, right? But I would be very surprised if they didn't say, wow, this is great. Thank you so much.
So we've got 8 minutes left. So is there any other slides that you're very keen or?
No, this was it. Can I pick up on one comment that I've just seen?
Yeah, there's a couple of nice, interesting comments that I thought we could discuss.
I just want to pick up on this one from Annette, I think it is.
I knew you were going to say that one.
The fear of calling people and having them say no puts me off calling them. I think it's basically, I've paraphrased the comment a bit. I would suggest that you should try and get to the no as soon as possible, and don't fear the no. Don't fear the no. What I mean by that, when you're calling somebody, you're trying to just qualify and ask questions to figure out where they're at in the buyer journey. We're not trying to sell to them. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to talk them out of working with us so that we have more capacity to take on good fit clients and to market and sell to people who do have the problems that we can solve. So how this normally works is I would try and assume that people aren't interested and detached from the outcome. I would say things like, oh, I see you've inquired on our website. Just wondering what drove your interest. Typically, people that inquire experience this problem, that problem, or the other problem, blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming none of those apply to you. And then shut up.
But the interesting thing is, she's actually said these are people that have come onto a site and filled in a form for a lead. So to me, these are the guys that are reaching out to you. They want you to call them back. So if they may not be the right person, but they are actually disappointed if you don't contact them. And a lot of research shows that if you contact them within the first 15 minutes, you've got a massive chance of converting that lead, because you're making that effort and you're available and you're having that conversation with them. And that falls off really, really rapidly. And a lot of people, I've inquired to companies. I actually sent an inquiry for a conference venue this week, and I've got a budget to spend, and nobody's bothered to contact me back. I'm now pissed with that company for not bothering, and actually just by not bothering to pick up the phone, you've lost that opportunity to sell. So I would say these are people that want to talk to you and they'd be pleased to speak to you. So actually, the fear of them saying no is much more different than you're just doing cold outreach. And so I would flip your mindset around that they're going to be disappointed if you don't call them rather than them being disappointed if you do. And that might make that process much, much easier. There are some techniques to getting through to people, aren't there? Because doing cold outreach to people you don't know, who aren't aware of you, is quite a bit harder. So have you got any really big tips that you'd like to say to people that are maybe calling a list, or how to get the right list, or who to bother to call on that list? Maybe a better question.
Of course. Well, I've worked for a cold calling company, right, for many years. So I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think what I would say, especially if you're a smaller company, Cold calling is control. It's power. What I mean by that is if you aren't just relying on referrals and people to find you, and it's very seasonal and spiky, that can be, quite a alarming thing. If you can have the ability to cold call somebody or cold call a list of good fit prospects, you can control your destiny more than if you were just relying on. So how this can normally work is find some good fit prospects. There are a whole way you can do it using sales nav, using different tools. So who do you think you can sell to? Find what their mobile number is. There are some tools that you can do to do this. If you ask me nicely, I might tell you, or maybe I'll do that on a different. When you call that person, you say something like this. Hi, Anne. Oh, you're going to hate me. This is actually one of those annoying sales calls. I'm not sure if you just want to hang up the phone now, or do you want to give me 30 seconds to explain why I've chosen to call you? Now, you've interrupted the pattern there, because if you're like, hi, Anne, how are you? It's just Sean here from Generation Demand. I'm just calling to... Anne's switched off as soon as I started speaking. She's thinking, who's this guy? That's the pattern that people are used to. And they'll, even if I had something that were going to change Anne's life, she's probably switched off. Because I've been upfront with her, I've said, this is a sales call. Do you just want to hang up now? I've given her the choice. I've detached from the outcome. I'm trying to get to the no, because if Anne hangs up, I'll move on to somebody else. It's totally fine, right? But what she will probably say is, well, I guess it depends why you've called me. I would then say, okay, and if I told you I was typically invited in my companies who struggle to generate pipeline consistently, or maybe it's not that, maybe it's they just aren't closing the leads fast enough, I'm not sure why, or maybe it's just their sales and marketing teams don't, and it's driving them crazy. And I'm assuming you're going to tell me none of those apply to your organization. And then show up. And then Anne might say, well, maybe, yeah, some of that sounds okay, interesting. Tell me more. Even if Anne said to me, no, none of those, no, we don't have any of those problems, I'll go, okay. So Anne, you're telling me everything's perfect. You're totally happy with the level of revenue you're getting in your organization. Nothing could be improved. Well, no, I didn't quite say that. Oh, right, okay, interesting. Wait, so if you don't mind me asking, again, I'm priming for another tough question, because I'm a stranger and still speaking to me, but you might be like, I'm not going to tell the stranger stuff. You'd say, I'm going to ask another question here. At the risk of being hung up on, what area of your business do you think could be improved in the most? And then you're into a conversation here, guys, right? You're trying to qualify what this person might be experiencing or might not be experiencing. If you've done your homework, it's probably very likely that they're actually going to be experiencing the challenges that you can help with. Even if Anne says to me, which does happen, Sean, listen, thanks for the call. I've got pipeline coming out my ears. I've got more work than I can handle. I appreciate the call, but no, I don't need your help. You can say, Anne, totally fine. Congratulations. Can I give you a call back in 3 months' time? Yes, fine. Okay, great. Call's ended. In 3 months' time, hi, Anne, this is Sean here. You asked me to give you a call back 3 months ago. There's more effective. Now it's not a cold call. She might not remember, but she's asked me to call her back. So it's how can we sort of leverage everything that we do? And even, but sorry, missed one key thing as well. If Anne goes, yes, that's fine, call back in 3 months, you can say, okay, great. Anne, can I be really cheeky here before I let you go? Right, okay, I'm sure she's listening still because I'm engaged, I've interrupted the pattern. Do you think there's anyone in your network who might not be as lucky as you when it comes to sales pipeline that you think might potentially be interested in speaking to me? We say in the Northeast, and you can probably tell them from the Northeast, we say shy Ben's getting out, which roughly translates into if you do not ask, you do not get. Plant that seed in that person's head. Even your best customers, right? Your best customers, if you don't ask for referrals, you're probably not going to get them, right? So now if Anne goes, well, actually, I like Sean, I like the cut of his jib, right? He's called me. Very few people cold call anymore. And, he seems like an all right guy, even though he's from the Northeast. He's asked me if I know anybody. Actually, I think I do. I spoke to Susan or whoever the other day, and she said she was struggling. Yeah, actually, Sean, there is. Okay, can I be really cheeky? Would you mind doing an email intro for me now? Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, fine. Then Anne's now referred me to someone in her network. If I'd cold call Susan, it would have been less powerful than just Anne pinging a quick email to that person for me.
Brilliant.
That's how you leverage it.
Is that a good point to finish? I think it probably is. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions that you want to ask. There's quite some interesting discussion. I've just put up the please can you leave us a review. So if any of you would like to leave us a review, mention Sean's name so he can get the credit for his great webinar this morning. There's a question from Anastasia. How you say I'm not quite sure what she means by that, so I can't understand why I can't necessarily bomb-proof to yeah. I mean, it is hard doing outreach. It's not a job that I particularly enjoy, and one of the biggest issues is getting through to people. One of the interesting things that Sean was telling me that he's found, even with a good email list, that sometimes people just don't recognize the number, they don't pick up. I mean, you've played around with even using WhatsApp to try and improve engagement rate, haven't you? Yeah, so I don't know whether that will work for you. Annette, yeah, I think you can email them, that's fine, but I would email them to organize a call. So you say, yeah, thank you so much for inquiry. Can we get and make sure you've got a Calendly link or a link, and give them the time, give them the option of when they organize the call, rather than you say, oh, I'm free tomorrow. That just won't happen. Whereas if you give them a link and they can book it in at a time that's convenient with them, that will take them to the next stage. And one of the key things that Sean's taught me, I guess I've been doing it subconsciously all of my life without realizing it, is all my business life, is you want to get them to the next stage. So whenever I'm talking to people, I don't consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself a consultant, but my KPI is to get the sales in, really, is to deliver the business for the business, is to get them to the point where I think they realize that we know what we're talking about, they trust us. And the next stage is, well, if we do an audit for you, you're going to get loads of useful information. And if you have got a need, then we're going to make some recommendations for you. So that's sort of my job, is to get them to the next stage of identifying whether they are a good fit and whether we can help them. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Tony, can you tell us what's next week? Is Tony there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. So next week we're having a talk from the head of PR at Annika Digital. And yeah, that's pretty much what it is. She's going to be joined by Lauren.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Tracy, I totally agree. Let's find the problem. We talk about pains and gains, don't we, Sean? Let's find the problem that we need to solve for them, or we can solve them, or something that they'd like, which they currently haven't got. So definitely a good tip. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll send the recording out later, and have a great weekend, and we'll speak to you next week. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye. Happy hunting.
Bye, everyone.